Redditors who knew men caught on to catch a predator before the show. What were they like? This will get buried at this point, but my friend dated someone who ended up disappearing. Then we eventually found out he had been arrested for trying to sleep with an underage girl and having rope and guns in his trunk. It wasn't until a few weeks later that we even learned he was on the show. It just kept unraveling. He had come to get drinks for one of my birthdays, and to be honest, he seemed completely normal. There was nothing that stood out to me as creepy or off. My friend was a wreck after everything happened. She's a smart girl too, and didn't expect anything like that, a fake. I felt really bad for her. Not on to catch a predator, but I had a youth hockey coach who I always thought was a really nice guy. I was like 14 at the time, but he'd always call me after games and give me tips and pointers, and I never found it weird. Just figured he was a good guy doing something for kids. He didn't have any children though. 20 years later or so, I see him at a rink. To my surprise, he remembers me. We talk for a half an hour. He asks me about my parents. I show him pictures of my family. He starts telling me about this girl that he coached since she was 10 on a girls hockey team, who is now in college playing for a very good school. I'll be honest, I didn't think anything of it. Anyway, we go our separate ways, but do exchange phone numbers. I go home and tell my wife that I saw my old hockey coach and I'd like to invite him over for a cookout. I figured I'd call him over the weekend. Literally the very next day, he gets arrested for trying to meet up with a 13-year-old girl in a chat room that was really the state police. I never invited him. Didn't actually know the guy, but one guy showed up to the sting in a company semi-truck. It is blurred out in the episode, but the company is Covenant Transport. I went to work for them a few years after the episode. During orientation they gave us a list of things that will result in immediate termination. Things like driving under the influence, failing a drug screen, and impromptu meetings with Chris Hansen. I went to school with Rob Klein. From what I can remember of him was that he was quiet and kept to himself. He never did anything to label himself a creep. His excuse for showing up has to be one of the worst. Rob said he showed up to let the 13-year-old girl know he wasn't going to be able to hang out after making the 2-hour drive there. He also throws his brother under the bus for the child porn that is on his computer. I think this show had more to do with the demise of Yahoo Messenger than anything else. I didn't know the guy before the show, but after. This was over a decade ago, back in 2008 or 2009. I was on a dating website and was talking to a guy that claimed to be a doctor. I thought it was very unusual that this doctor, Maurice Wallen, had so much free time throughout the day to text me so frequently. Texting back then was a bit time consuming with flip phones. Was also begging me to meet up with him and telling me he wanted to shower me with all these gifts. He seemed a bit arrogant and pompous to me in the way he would brag about his wealth and cars. I was getting suspicious of the guy and reverse searched his phone number. I found out he gave me a fake name, and after getting his real name, I saw all the articles online and saw the guy was on TCAP. I couldn't believe what I was seeing and asked him to send me a new selfie. Sure enough, it was definitely him. I ghosted him and blocked his number and reported his profile to Plenty of Fish and told them he was on TCAP. Just really glad I never met up with him. Be careful out there, everyone. A supervisor at my previous job got busted in a big sting at the end of last year with a bunch of other dudes. He was kinda dumpy in appearance, but thought he was hot shit. Both at the job and with the women. He wasn't. There were more than a few who transferred out of his area or specifically asked not to work directly with him. A couple of them said he just creeped them out and let his touch linger longer than was polite. He was just another shitbag to me. One of those guys that never did anything unless the boss was around, liked to be the one at the company meetings who told everyone to quiet down and listen up when it was already quiet. Rappy, extremely rappy. Was someone from my hometown in New York. Went to school with their younger sister. After he graduated high school, he did everything he could to hang out with much younger kids. Always wanted to buy booze for us, or roll up a joint and smoke us out in his van. Never touched me, but there were rumors of him molesting a 12-year-old in sleepaway camp. I knew the cop from, I think Florida, Alabama that was arrested on the show. He had guns and rope in his vehicle when he went to meet the girl. Super creepy stuff. When he was a sheriff's deputy in Florida, he would come into my job frequently. So, I didn't know him on a personal level, but I did talk to him on a regular basis. He was a really nice, respectful guy. He seemed to be a good cop too. I was shocked when I saw the episode. You never really know what goes on in someone's bedroom. Here is part of the episode. I was one dude's ram in university. He was a seriously weird dude, but was relatively friendly, came out to all of the campus events, and was not suspected of being a predator at all by any of us in the dorms back in those days. He was busted on TCAP about 2 to 3 years after I graduated, so probably sometime 2003 to 2005. I fortunately don't know any predators, but I did work with a young woman who had worked on the show. She did the post-production voiceovers for the catfishing texts between the detectives and the predators. She was the voice of the non-existent teen girl. Like the "oh I don't know much about 6, I'm only 13 lol" stuff. Apparently she was a production assistant or intern at the production office, and one of the producers was like, "We need somebody with a young sounding voice, you say something," and she did, and he was like, "Perfect. Come with me," and she recorded all the dialogue. Right after she told a bunch of us at work, this was a couple years later at a different job, I went home that night and watched an episode and could tell it absolutely was her voice. Hilarious. I just knew a kid whose dad was on the show when we were in middle school. Always felt really bad for the kid and his family. I don't know anyone from the show, but I was very close to my father, who is a predator. Middle-aged geeky dude, had 2 daughters. I was 18, my sibling 20 at the time of arrest, bit socially awkward, but known as a really kind guy. Always generous with his time, worked at a community center helping underprivileged kids learn how to use computers. Yeah, turns out he was molesting at least 2 girls from there, 4 and 8, and hosting a child porn ring from the center's server. No one suspected it. He loved kids, but that's cause he had to, right? He'd fix everyone's computers for free and help them get into work. Really great upstanding citizen. He got 16 years and everyone else got a lifetime of trust issues and trauma. Yes, Matty Nash. He was creepy and kept trying to get me to go to Burning Man. When I told him I didn't think that was a good idea, because I had a 10-year-old kid at the time, he said I should bring my kid. Now I don't think he was interested in my kid at all, but I did tell him I thought that would be super creepy to bring a kid to Burning Man with a bunch of people on E. This was in 2001. He came over to my house under the guise of talking business and then put the moves on me. I turned him down and sent him home to his wife. I didn't know the person directly, but I worked at a company that had an employee caught on the show. This was particularly problematic, as the company was Nickelodeon Animation. Everyone who knew the guy was actually pretty shocked. It was particularly rough for his girlfriend at the time, as she also worked at the studio, so there was no hiding from it. For their part, Nickelodeon instituted rigorous background checks for every new employee after the incident, with zero tolerance for any misdeeds involving children. Those background checks are what keeps this law alive though, as the process, if much more intensive than any other studio. Oh, I can actually answer this one. He legit was always trying to sleep with men that were way too young for him, albeit just barely legal, and we made jokes all the time to him about how he was going to wind up on that show. We literally called him Herbert. It was the opposite of a he was the last person I would suspect situation. A few summers ago I went out for a dog walk on a Saturday afternoon and there were loads of people outside my house. There was a pedophile hunter group on a sting with a guy down the street. Turns out he'd been soliciting sex from 14-year-old girls, sending them D*****ck pics, and asking to meet up with him. Charming. It all blew up, he got arrested, got the world's most pathetic suspended sentence, and now he's trying to act like nothing happened. His family stood by him, even his wife, and the whole thing is really quite bizarre. I guess the only fallout was that he lost his job and didn't leave the house for about 3 months, but it's all gone back to normal now. The guy was always a weirdo, very controlling and rude. He was probably the only person on the street I took an immediate dislike to. There was just something off about him. I guess it is good to trust your instincts. I wonder if he's still at it, or whether the slap on the wrist taught him a lesson. I don't think he was on the show, but when I was waiting to leave for Navy boot camp, one of the recruiters was caught in a sting operation. He thought he was texting and meeting up with a teenage girl, and went to meet her during work, while in uniform, and in his government vehicle. I know he was arrested, but I don't know what happened besides that his wife divorced him. Never heard of this show, so I googled it. Why did To Catch a Predator get cancelled? Cancellation. The show was cancelled in 2008, in part because Louis Conrad, an assistant district attorney in Rockwall County, Texas, shot himself after he was caught talking to and exchanging pictures with a perverted justice volunteer posing as a 13-year-old boy. Hahaha, wow, WTF.